This is this is a new recording. There's this idea in this idea in Torah Judaism that 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 what actually changes the status of something in the case of a korban of an animal sacrifice. When are you allowed to eat it and utilize it, and when has its status changed to actually achieve what it's supposed to achieve? So a korban, a sacrifice, has got stages of its usage. There's four stages in bringing a korban, an animal sacrifice. Till the last stage, it hasn't actually become a korban yet. Let me just wait on a tick. Whoops. Oh, yeah. So in the Talmudic Halacha, there's a concept of this matir, and it affects really the idea of kodshim in sacrificial things, which refer to sacrificial items, when they change and when they become permitted in a new in a new halachic stage, that is most primarily from after its usage as an actual sacrifice for another stage where some of the meat might be eaten by the kahanim, and they allow them to be eaten, the meat to be eaten by the Kohen and other families or any otherwise used. So a core idea which relates to it is that some process which is called matir. Matir means to release. They become released from one state to another. The matir is an enabling act or component that changes its state, because until that matir state works, the kodshim, the sacrificed offering, are in some sort of restricted state. And once the matir takes place, the status changes and certain uses become permitted. So we can reflect very soon on how that is affected with our grain idea. But let's just first go to the classic example of it in relationship to korbanos. For many korbanos, is the sprinkling of the blood on the mizbeach, on the altar, is the primary matir, meaning to say that before the sacrifice is actually brought on the altar, that is before the sprinkling of the blood of the meat, sprinkling of the blood of the sacrifice on the altar, the meat is forbidden to be eaten, and but after this rika, after the sprinkling of the blood, the meat becomes permitted to whoever is getting the meat. That might be the original owner of the korban, or the original owner of the sacrifice, or to the kahanim, or to, depending on who's going to be allowed to it. And this is a central idea in the concept of materium, of release, that in the entire system of korbanos, because this changes the state from non-permissibility to eat to permissibility. Now, another one of these, in some offerings, the burning of the designated fats and limbs on the altar acts as the complete of the matir. And now, in grain offerings, or in grain offerings, in the meal offering, the taking an offering of the kavetz, the handful of flour, is the one which is matir, and only after that may the remainder be eaten by the kohen. So, what is the actual function of this? The role of the matir in kodshim is to define when our prohibition ends and permission begins, and which act is essential to activate that transition, and liability around eating before the matir can incur serious prohibitions like chorus or me'ila in certain cases. So in the halakhic analysis, the matir is not just another step in the process, it's a status-changing trigger, often the critical permissibility of point of permissibility, and this is used in conceptual analysis of activity about what invalidates a korban and when liability applies. And, this is the analysis of what happens when something becomes a matir. Now, we're going to apply that in a second to our discussion that we. So, in the particular case of Chodesh, of new grain, or this period of time, the Torah prohibits us eating from the new grain, a new grain crop, until a specific permitting act occurs, and that's the bringing of the korban. So the verse says, "V'lechem v'keli v'karma le'techlu." A person's not allowed to eat bread or grains till the specific day, and that day is the day after the Pesach offering, which is mentioned in Leviticus 20:23. And what is the matir? What is the thing which allows it to do? The matir for the new grain is that the korban ha'omer, the korban of the omer, which is the 16th, given on the 16th of Nisan, as we mentioned, and the bringing of the omer permits all new grain to be eaten. But until that act, all new grain is also in a Torah. But after that act, the new grain becomes permitted. So this is like this is like the idea of kodshim, of the idea of the korbanos, that in the case of the actual altar, sacrifice on the altar, zrikas adam, the sprinkling of the blood, permits the meat. So also in our case, the krovas ha'omer, the bringing of the omer, allows the new grain, and before the bringing of that grain, it's also so in the same way the meat is also, so in the same way the grain after the bringing of the korban, or prior to the bringing of the korban omer, it's you're not allowed, but after the sprinkling of the blood, for instance, you're allowed to eat the meat. So also after bringing the meal offering, the Omer offering, you're allowed to eat the grain. So the Omer is functioning like a global matir, not for one korban, but for all the products, for all the grain products. And as I said, that has a relationship to us today, because the 16th of Nisan in presently, even though we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, it actually acts as the allowance matir for us to use new grain and in Israel and the rest of the world. So this is often called ha'er hamizrach matir, that the midday or dawn level time allows the new grain to be used in any produce. And so practically speaking, after the 16th of Nisan, the new grains are allowed to be used in any products which is used in Israel and around the world for everyone. So there are so in relationship to that, so we actually have two types of matir. We have an action-based matir and we have a time-based matir. So in the case of the korban, it's an action-based because that was done at the time of sprinkling of the blood, and or the bringing of the korban Omer at the base of Mikdash. But we've also got the time-based one, which is like the day of the day when it was supposed to be brought, which is the 16th of Nisan. That was also in a matir, and therefore there's a distinction about the idea that the permissibility isn't really based on what you do or when or a time. Notwithstanding that, in our case of grain, it can be either. Okay, so that's a bit of a discussion of the idea of matir. Now, if we use that ideas that we just talked about, we can see that that's reflected in the idea of the Omer, and as we mapped it into the bringing of the Omer and how to understand it.
Okay.
So the concept of a matir in both of those ideas of kodshim, of korbanos, and in the food grain based is that the object that we're talking about, right? The object, whether it might be grain or a korban, is in a state of potential permissibility, but our rules and our halacha doesn't or withholds permission of usage till the matir event, till the release event happens. So in the case of the korbanos, in the case of the bringing of the korbanos, it's the action of sprinkling the blood. In the case of the Chodesh, in the grain at the time when the temple exists, it's the bringing of the Omer sacrifice, and then post when there's no temple, it says that after the day when the Omer would have been brought, the completion of the day, or at least the completion of the majority of the day, that time is now over, and it would have been done if the temple would have existed. So therefore, at that point in time, the new grain is then becomes permissible. I hope this discussion enhances your ideas and enhances your understanding of the sicher which we aligned it to, the idea of chodesh in the oats and the wheat, and the ultimate usage of the Shtei HaLechem in the temple.